Nothing sounds when it breaks, but the silence that follows, it's deafening. You are the first to hear this silence. Amidst the laughter shared around a table, you find yourself alone with your own shadow. The laughter becomes a frequency that does not reach you. A place within you, unnamed and often ignored, grows emptier with each passing moment. Like the inner turmoil of Dostoevsky's heroes walking the streets of Petersburg, the outside world is alive, but a storm rages within the soul. Ask yourself, why doesn't this person speak? Why do their eyes remain fixed on the other side of the room? Why do they pull back when a helping hand is extended? Why does sincerity turn into a threat? Simple answers fall short, for the loneliness of trauma is not an easily understood condition. Trauma is a mirror that was once shattered and never mended. Some live with a superficial crack, others with a deep fracture. When the mirror shards are pieced back together, the face appears different, yet each fragment bears the imprint of that original fracture. While trauma pushes a person toward loneliness, it also shelters them within a protective armor. This armor is invisible, yet it is heavy. Sometimes it is so heavy that the person feels as though they have forgotten how to walk. This inability to walk is interpreted by those around them as stiffness, coldness, or indifference. But the distance between them is more often than not a defense mechanism, avoiding others to avoid being hurt again. This is a paradox we frequently see in Dostoevsky's characters. Souls that punish themselves yet show no mercy toward their own pain. The isolated person sometimes speaks, but words turn into the shadow of a meaning. What they say is dismissed or simply filed away as an old story. People's eyes eventually drift elsewhere. Impatience replaces empathy. The person carrying trauma, however, knows the storm behind this calm. A word lies on the surface, but the feelings beneath it are an ocean. This ocean does not crash against the shore at random. Its waves move to a hidden rhythm and erupt like debris flung onto the shore at the slightest touch. We often encounter this in Dostoevsky's novels, the human being circling within the realm of guilt, shame, and hope. There, the characters distort their own faces through the eyes of society. Guilt and loneliness intertwine. This is what those who become isolated after trauma experience: an internal imprisonment. The guardian of this imprisonment is usually memory. Trauma keeps it hanging there like a nailed-down painting. Looking at that painting reopens the wound. That's why the person chooses not to look. They pretend to look, but they close their eyes. Over time, this person's behavior becomes a habit. Habit is sometimes the strongest veil. After a while, the person justifies their loneliness. They say, "This is who I am. My calmness is depth." Those around them also want to believe this easily, because belief is more comfortable than facing complex pains. However, this acceptance is a trap that prevents the trauma from healing. Perhaps decay does not begin within the isolated person, but the movement of emotions freezes. It is hard to see the stirrings of fish in a frozen lake. The surface appears calm. Yet life continues beneath the ice. It also carries the risk of drowning. Sometimes this loneliness affects others as well. Because trauma is not contagious, but its effect is like a field. As loved ones try to understand them, they wear down. Patience runs out and blame begins. "Why aren't you helping yourself?" they say. This statement doesn't elicit the expected response. You see the blame pulling the other person even deeper into themselves. The person experiencing trauma perceives offers of help as a burden, an imposition. In their world, help is often a declaration of defeat. There is an inner voice saying, You see, I'm wounded, but don't touch it. Like Dostoevsky's characters, shame sometimes pushes the helping hand away. When pride merges with the guilt they've imposed on themselves, the refusal of help becomes a jarring and meaningful act of resistance. Here we must pause and ask, how can we see these people without hurting them? How should we approach them? There is no easy formula, but there are a few careful paths. First, we must accept the meaning of silence. Silence is not a void. It is a hidden compartment where something is kept. Do not rush when looking at it. Haste often undermines empathy and pushes the other person further away. Being present in a slow, mindful way is the most humane thing one can do at the outset. Sometimes, simply standing there in silence without offering solutions brings a little healing. Second, sharing helps more than asking questions. Questions can come across as accusatory when misunderstood. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with you?" saying, "I've been through moments like that too," or "I'd like to sit with you today," is more soothing. This is an approach we often see in Dostoevsky's novels, accompanying without judgment. Because judgment triggers a person's defense mechanisms. Companionship, however, opens the door. Yet even the best intentions don't always find a response. A person may choose not to connect due to the effects of trauma. This choice may seem illogical from the outside, but logic has no place here. Trauma reorganizes people's priorities and values. Survival, this can be a sensory escape, a habit, or a way of setting boundaries. That is why patience, empathy, and the capacity to wait become the most valuable virtues. Consider the inner monologues of Dostoyevsky's characters. They frequently question their own behavior, but they only question. Action is sometimes delayed or never comes. Inner questioning, while promising enlightenment on one hand, can be paralyzing on the other. Those who become isolated after trauma also have a similar inner monologue. If I heal, what happens? Who will I become? Is suffering a part of my life? These questions have a shattering effect on identity. If a person has made suffering a foundation of their identity, they may perceive letting go of suffering as giving up their very existence. Understanding this tests the patience of those trying to help. Because helping is easy, bringing about lasting transformation is hard. Things that provide short-term relief, a cup of coffee, a conversation, are effective for certain moments. But if you want a flower to bloom at the roots, you have to work the soil. Soil requires patience. It demands consistent and dedicated care. Another common scenario is turning the narrative of trauma into a competition. My trauma is bigger. I don't understand yours because mine. This turns into a race that undermines empathy. There is no winner in this race. Everyone loses. Trauma does not diminish when shared. It gains meaning when shared correctly. In other words, one must listen without minimizing the experience or reducing the other person to a one-dimensional figure. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect is the alienation from oneself that develops within the inner world of a person who has become isolated as a result of trauma. The color of the relationship they have with themselves fades. At times, they even behave toward themselves as if they were a stranger. This theme frequently emerges in Dostoyevsky. A person's inability to make peace with themselves is the fundamental reason they cannot find peace in the world. This situation affects others because relationships are now built on roles rather than genuine bonds. The stage for these roles may be the home or the workplace. Yet when the curtain falls, a solitary figure remains. This solitary figure is sometimes a harbinger of a silent suicide. I would have preferred not to use the word suicide here, but we must face reality. Silent suicide is the gradual draining of life's energy, the disappearance of small joys. A person may still appear functional from the outside, but inwardly, a process of dissolution is taking place. This is why caution is necessary. There are certain warning signs: sudden withdrawal, detachment from all interests, uncertainty about future plans, and a lack of self-worth. These signs must be recognized and addressed carefully before they escalate into a crisis. There is another challenge here: societal perception. The myth of being strong fosters a tendency to hide vulnerability. In many cultures, showing pain is seen as a sign of weakness, yet sharing pain requires courage. In Dostoevsky's works, characters often mask their fragility. The reality beneath that mask is even more painful. When we encounter fragility, we should strive to protect it. Instead of judging it, we should accompany it. So, what should we do in practice? First, we must understand this: hasty solutions do not work. Short-term interventions can build a bridge, but if we want a lasting bridge, the foundations must be solid. The foundation is trust and continuity. Trust is built not in words but in actions. Consistency is not random but deliberate attention. It is not remembering from time to time, but choosing to be by their side. These two elements can open a door into the world of someone who has become isolated after trauma. Reading Dostoyevsky sheds light on this. In his novels, sometimes a small gesture, a letter, a silent wait, a cup of tea, enables a person to cling to life once more. It is the continuity of the gesture rather than its grandeur that matters. Speaking with someone for a few sessions and then withdrawing can create an even greater sense of disappointment in their world. That is why what is needed is not a brief outburst of compassion, but a steadfast presence. It is also essential to recognize cultural and individual differences. The outward expression of trauma varies. Some people become angry, others fall silent, and still others behave in an overly controlled manner. This diversity makes empathy more complex but also more realistic. Setting aside our own preconceptions is a crucial step, because forcing a person's inner world into categories we recognize amounts to denying their unique pain. Sometimes the most harmful thing people can do is test others against their own myths of healing. Saying you should be healed by now imposes a pace of healing. Healing is not a quick process. It often involves setbacks, recurring traumatic moments, and unexpected triggers. This cycle requires attention and understanding. Offering countless small acts of support, a message, a meal, sitting in unexpected silence, is more effective than passing judgment. And yet, sometimes nothing is enough. Accepting this truth is difficult for many of us. Acceptance is not giving up. It is more about setting boundaries and protecting yourself. Accepting that you cannot save someone does not diminish your humanity. It simply shows that you are at peace with reality. This boundary is necessary for both your well-being and that of the other person. At the end of the video, a subtle call to the viewer. If these thoughts feel familiar to you, give yourself permission. Don't rush to write a comment, breathe first. This text is not a test, it is a window. You don't have to open the window, but sometimes there are people who crack it open. Their very presence is enough. Like the souls wandering through Dostoyevsky's dark cities, those who have become isolated after trauma also roam their own inner streets. They may unsettle you because the truth is unsettling. Their loneliness is an invisible depth, and that depth can sometimes pull you down. But at the same time, their story might hold a spark of light, a small act of kindness, a silent waiting, or a new beginning like the morning sun. Finally, remember, We all have fragile spots within us. Before approaching someone harshly, feel your own fragility. When you see the distance in someone's eyes, don't rush to explain it. Their distance might be a language, a scream they can't articulate that won't fit into words. Listening to that language is more important than deciphering it, because listening is sometimes a greater healing than speaking. And now I ask, what will you do when you see them? Will you knock on the door, or will you let the silence remain?